It's literally, it's literally, it's lit Z. Peace, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Literally Z. I'm your host, Z, literally. And today we're going to be going down into a rabbit hole, basically. From an experience, I went down a rabbit hole and did a lot of extra research. But I want to start this on a super positive note. We're going to end on a positive note too, okay? But super positive in the sense that I now have a complete dissertation proposal draft. Thank you so much. Thank you. I accept all the applause. So I just finished the introduction chapter. I'd already done the literature review, and I'd also already done the methods chapter. So I just finished the intro. It's rough. It's rough, okay? It needs a few reads. It's rough, but it's done. And so we praise God. I'm very happy about that. And I'll give more updates it's not done. It's not done. But I will give more updates as they become available, i.e. they get done. Okay. So get into this encounter. To give it a bit of a background before I get into the rabbit hole that happened, basically I was out grocery shopping with my girl, and we went to a first one that's, it was decently nearby in a gentrified area. And we had a good experience. There were baskets, although we went back to that same one at a different point, and the basket area smelled pissy, in my opinion. Sorry, excuse the French. But nevertheless, overall, they have a decent selection, have a lot of produce options, decently priced, a good couple deals and whatnot. But they didn't have everything. So we also went to another store because we were just trying to make this large meal, if you will. Trying to, whoa, were we feasting out? I don't think we were, honestly. This is about a week or so ago. So give me some grace. But yeah, so we're doing, I guess it's just because, again, she has her own meal prepping stuff she's doing. I'm doing my own barely meal prepping type thing, trying to make sure I eat something every day, but not really meal prepping, but trying to do better at that thing. So she had a decently long list that was like really thought out, and I just was picking stuff up. So because she had a longer list that was drawn out, we needed to go to a couple spots. So the second spot we tried to go to, no baskets. We're literally waiting outside for at least like 5 to 10 minutes for somebody who's already been in the store to return a basket. And then meanwhile, we're seeing baskets that are not for that store. Baskets for other stores, like just different color scheme, different name on it. I mean, it's not the basket for the store. And also, a lot of people were bringing their own baskets. We was like, dang, we didn't get the memo. I should have brought my buggy. I got my own little buggy. I could have brought my buggy. So it just was a lot, just off top, not even getting into the store. Then we get into the store, and it's just so many additional security barriers. And I've been to the store before. I used to go to the store a decent bit, but I've not been there in a minute. And I was also stunned by, I was like, oh my God, no baskets no more. I ain't never seen no baskets in here. Now I knew once you get to self-checkout, they don't have the bags there. You have to say you want the bag, then you have to flag somebody over, they bring you the bag. That way people are not stealing the bags, yada, 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 yada. But never, like, that I was more used to, but the whole like have to scan the receipt to leave, it's just a lot. And we literally, while we were there checking out, there was a black man at that, who had not bought anything, but there's literally no other way to get out of the store, so he had to go through self-checkout and be like, hey, can y'all open this for me, like just having to ask. So it was just a lot. And she started kind of just being like, this is literally ridiculous, like why would they do this? But us both knowing why is anti-black racism. And so I was like, ooh, like I just know there has to be so much literature on this. And I already knew a decent bit. We'll go over the term like food deserts and other terms that are related to it. And I almost wanted to get into environmental racism and injustice. I'm going to pause that for the next episode. So please stay tuned. It's going to be not a fully back-to-back situation, but they're going to be pretty close back-to-back. We'll see. But getting into it with the grocery stores, back in February of 2024, there's an article from, and I will insert it here, from Catherine Douglas Moran, where she is talking about these receipt scanning gates. Because that's the first thing I looked up. It's like, who was talking about these? Now, she's talking about them up at the Safeway, all right? And these locations started in San Francisco at select Safeways in San Francisco, and then they spread to select locations in the Washington, D.C. area. Now, let's pause and consider why that might have been. Spoiler alert, is anti-black racism, okay, which I already had prefaced. So San Francisco, I did not know much about it. Like, honestly, you say San Francisco, I'm thinking can't even really talk about that show no more. Ooh, they ruined that. But Full House, I'm gonna be honest. I think about Full House, okay? But then I read a piece a couple years ago from Dr. Savannah Shangay called Progressive Dystopia, which kind of changed my tune and my understanding of San Francisco as a place. So she talks in there about a whole lot of terms. She talks about revolution, abolition, especially she's also talking about progressive. It's in the title. So, and insert book. So sorry, insert book. Okay. So when we think about progressive, it is the redistributive ideal and contest over how to realize an abolition new world. Okay. So it's just this, and I like that she said contest because they really do feel like you're checking off boxes trying to get there, like get there faster than somebody else. Wild, okay? And then she talks about, again, progressive dystopia. She talks about dystopian practices and how they provide an education of perception that attunes us to death, dispossession, and disposability to these interpreted realities. So it's not actually getting us there, basically. Perception. Perception is not reality, right? So we have a perception of progressiveness. We have a perception that things are getting better. We have a perception that people are getting free and abolition is happening. But in reality, it's the same old, same old. That's what she was basically saying. Same old, same old. Okay. So using years of research at this Robeson Justice Academy, okay, which is a pseudonym for a real school, which one could do some research to try to figure out what school it is. But nevertheless, it's a pseudonym. So don't look up this school and be like, girl, why you lying? No, I don't know the real name. She calls it Robeson Justice Academy. Okay. And she examined 7 concrete progressive wins in the context of this academy and the relative costs to Black Frisco residents, San Francisco, right? Black Frisco residents. Because I didn't when you hear San Francisco, at least when I heard San Francisco, I didn't think black. Me personally, I didn't think black, so that was news to me. Like maybe if you say Oakland, I'd be like, okay, black, but I didn't think San Francisco black. Okay, now also in there's a little plug to it. She talks about black skin, brown mass. That chapter was such a like, oh, because I had already taught in a city where, I'm in a historically black neighborhood that is starting to be more predominantly filled with Latinx folks, and the ways that brown then basically ascends to the level of whiteness. So basically, we continue this positioning of blackness as other, and instead of in the absence of whiteness, right? Because if there's no white people in the school for real, who ends up assuming that position? The idealized immigrant Latinx person who's hardworking. Their parents fought to get them here, and now they are just so studious, so academically inclined, yada yada yada. Which it's not saying this is untrue. Okay, I had marvelous, wonderful, great Latinx students, and I'm sure this school did as well, right? But it's just positioning black as other, especially in the spaces where they used to be the majority, right? And minoritizing them in spaces where they used to be majority. That's wild, okay? So we have here a graph, a figure of the San Francisco area as well as Oakland in 1970, okay? And we see the proportion of black folks outlined in this darker green with the orange outlining to it, okay? Then we flip to 2020. Look at that. Now where they all go? Pushed out. Okay. So we consider this kind of late stage because a lot of redlining happened toward the beginning of the 20th centuries. Okay. Not centuries, but you catching my gist. All right. But toward the beginning. Okay. They did that early on. Because we had, of course, enslavement, right? This ending in 1865. From there, we switch into this Jim Crow era. And within Jim Crow, we have to set boundaries. We cannot be together. So again, that's what I mean. Like late 19th, early 20th, a lot of redlining was occurring. But this is kind of like late stage redlining where folks, freed black folks were moving to these areas like apparently San Francisco, like Oakland and other places like this. We're staying with California right now. We're going to move on to some other places as well. But this late stage redlining for them happening between 1970 and then 2020, where they're being pushed out of spaces where again they used to predominate. Okay, And this then leads me to a conversation of DC as well, because this article highlighted what? It highlighted San Francisco and Washington, DC area. So I had to also talk a little bit about Chocolate City. All right, Chocolate City. Now, sorry, my legs are on the chair, so I keep moving the chair. I'm so sorry. But anyway, with DC, this is for those who are watching visually. For DC, aka Chocolate City, it went from, and again, this metric of 1970. So it's something about the 70s. Can you say war on drugs? And 80s. It's something about the 70s. That's a whole nother podcast. But I can't, I'm trying to dance around it because I can't get into every topic within every podcast episode. I'm trying to do better about that because I can go on a million different tangents, but it's something about the 70s. So, and this is from an article from NYU talking about DC, where they say there was a high in 1970 of 538,000 Black folks that then declined steadily to 309,000 in 2010. Okay. Then we see another graphic. This graphic is coming from the University of Illinois Library, Exhibit A here. And this has a shift of the DC demographic from, again, not what is it with that year? What is it with that year? Come on, war on drugs, 1970 to 2015. And once again, we see, and it's just pushing out into the what? Marginalization, marginalized, minoritized. Oh, words have meaning. So pushing out into the margins of the for Black folks. Okay. So relatedly, because it says DC area, I'm gonna have to go to Baltimore for a second. And we have the black butterfly there, which is theorized by Dr. Lawrence Brown. And so in this theorization, and this also comes in an article from Marcelin White from 2020 as well, where I don't know their pronouns, where White is talking about Dr. Lawrence Brown's The Black Butterfly as a book, but also as a concept. And so when we consider this, we know that in the 1930s, Black households comprised about 20% of the population, but were confined to 2% of Baltimore City. So they represented 20%, but were confined to only 2% of the city in concentrated neighborhoods within the east and the west of Baltimore. By 2000, this pattern remained largely intact. Black households comprised 64% of the population, and 60% of the neighborhoods in the city were at least 60% Black. So, again, very Black city. But what do we mean by this black butterfly? So, there's this picture of the original redlining for the city. And it is then juxtaposed compared to a graphic that shows the life expectancy for the city as well. And you will notice that if you look at that life expectancy, where it is low, it shapes two wings. Those wings are East and West Baltimore, which is where we just talked about the population of Black folks is large. Now, this is contrary to, I'm going to stop here and go ahead and talk about it, the white L. Now, you can barely see it for this first picture here, but if you look at the middle where it says the word Baltimore, right? You see it's where it says that word a little bit up as well and over, up and over, up and over. You see some darker purple in the middle there. That is the white L. Okay, these are, newer developed areas. So again, on the original redlining, it didn't have much shake into it, but now very developed gentrified areas. Okay. Another graphic. This graphic again has that historic redlining graph, but also then has social vulnerability. And we again see that the highest rates of social vulnerability shape two wings for the east and the west side of Baltimore. And then down the middle, the lower end of social vulnerability shapes a L, which we term the white L because that's where the white folks have come in to gentrify. So quickly coming back to this grocery store situation, the first one would have been in that low area of vulnerability. And that second one was in an area that I would say is around the high to very high area if I looked at it on a map exactly. Okay, so if I looked at them exactly together. So it all comes back to racism. And if I go back again to that article from 2024, she quoted a statement from Safeway's parent company where they said that the receipt scanning gates have been a long planned security improvement aimed at preventing theft. However, Carl Langhorst, who is an asset protection executive and adjunct criminal justice professor at the University of Cincinnati. And he is the former senior director of loss prevention. So that's Steph, right? Of loss prevention at Kroger. And he did that for at least 9 years. Okay. He noted that organized retail crime is a larger concern than shoplifting for groceries. Again, large scale organized retail crime is more so the problem than shoplifting for groceries. Okay. And he goes on to say the vast majority of shoppers are honest, and you can't ever put technology or any other asset protection solutions in that will drive them away from your store. But at the same time, you can't continue to have losses so great that they potentially drive you out of business. Because again, for our situation, after going to that store one time, will all the extra preventions and the gates and security measures, no buggies, no shopping carts, as the northerners would say, no carts, no buggies, me and my girl probably not going there no more. You know what I'm saying? We're probably not going there anymore. And there are probably other shoppers, because that area, albeit still again a very black urban area, inner city area, you could say those different things about it. It's near a university. And so there's still going to be students that want to also shop and not feel. This gets to this next article, but before I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I do want to insert some pictures of what these scanners look like. So this is a picture taken at a San Francisco store. So you see things locked. So again, you see the gate, like the receipt scanning gate, where you have to scan your receipt before you leave. Then you have so many different things, necessary things for just life and living, household items that are locked behind these cases, as well as other things here, more and more locks everywhere, locks, okay, for these loss prevention tools. And the last one is actually a picture taken within Washington, D.C. Now, I wanted to not get too far ahead of myself, but there's a CBC News, and this is for Canada, but I think it's still relevant. And it also creates this contrast because of the identity for the folks who were given the backlash in Canada. Okay, so this article is from Sophia Harris with CBC News, and the folks who were concerned there are kind of right along the lines of the concerns that Langhorst shared, right? So they have these stores called LeBlau, and Zehrs in Ontario. And they both faced backlash back in 2024 for these same receipt scanner gates. So in this report, she noted that these negative reactions were coming from consumers. And over the past year, the Retail Council of Canada just repeatedly kept saying, shoplifting is on the rise. It's driven by inflation. And it's unavoidable. We must do these. Okay. But what I found interesting was the reactions. So these negative reactions that Sophia was noting in this report, it was their race and the language they used. So these consumers were largely white men, and they were using language like, it's very intrusive. It makes me feel like a thief. What the hell's going on? I paid already. It's just not customer friendly tactic. I pay for my goods. I have a receipt. You can't be detained against your will for no reason. Sadly, Black folks, brown folks are not new to this. Unfortunately, we are actually true to this. If you've heard of food insecurity and food deserts, you already I follow my wavelength. You're on the same page as me. I'm going to take it a step farther, though, and discuss food apartheid. I know, another new term. I know, but hear us out, please, myself and the folks in the literature. All right. So we have this expert blog this is Nina Sevilla, who talked about food apartheid, titled also Racialized Access to Healthy, Affordable Food. This is back in 2021. Now, in her piece, she talks about this shift very plainly. I think it explained it very well. So she was living in Tucson, Arizona, in the Sonoran Desert. And it taught her that despite the common use of the term food desert, it's inaccurate and misleading. And it pulls focus away from the underlying root causes of the lack of access to healthy food in communities. Number one, it obscures the vibrant life and food systems in these communities. And number two, it implies that these areas are naturally occurring. And it's really number two where she sold me. Like, number one, that their food and there's vibrant life in these systems. I think that's definitely a very valid point. But desert really does imply that it's naturally occurring, that it's just the way it is. But what did we start this with? Redlining. Now, maybe I didn't get into it enough when we looked at those maps, but that was systematic, whichever you want to call it. But that wasn't by chance. People weren't picking up and leaving the homes that they had come to, especially after enslavement, for funsies. They weren't picking up and leaving because they wanted to. They get bought out, pushed out, honestly, by a lot of extra policies, especially with school desegregation. There was so much extra. Woo! And I can do a whole podcast on school desegregation. Stay focused, stay focused. It wasn't naturally occurring. That's man-made. Okay. So let's also then consider where the term came from. Once and again, it's something about the 70s and the 80s. What is it? So this term emerged in the 1970s and 80s, and it most often describes what areas with Black and Latinx populations. These areas have fewer supermarkets offering varieties of produce and healthy foods, and more small retail like convenience and liquor stores. So she also pulls from this article from Anna Bronze, who interviewed Karen Washington, who I have here beautifully displayed. Look at her beautiful locks. Come on, look at her beautiful face. Miss Washington. And she is a farmer and food activist. And within this piece, she points out that food desert is an outsider term. It's used by people who do not actually live in these areas. She says that, number one, people will tell you that they do have food. And number two, people in the hood have never used that term. When we're talking about, and this is Karen's own words, Karen Washington's own words, when we're talking about these places, there's so much life and vibrancy and potential. Using that word runs the risk of preventing us from seeing all of those things. Now, her statement should be enough. But if you need some university backing on her statements, all right, these are also supported by research from Johns Hopkins University. And within these research spaces, there's also been a flood of new words. So we had the food deserts. I just talked about why food desert is an outsider term. It makes it seem like it's naturally occurring. It's no bueno. We don't like it. We also now have words like food mirage and food swamps. Now, neither one of them sound good. Okay. Now, on the one hand, we have the food mirage, which describes a phenomenon where there are places to buy food, but they are too expensive for the neighborhood. That don't seem like an accident. Okay. And then two, we have food swamps, areas with easier access to fast food and junk food than to healthier food. Once again, that don't seem like an accident. Mirages, again, more a natural thing in the environment. Swamps, a natural, although mirage is kind of like with the brain and exhaustion and dehydration and things, but nevertheless, still of the body, natural. And then swamps, obviously, natural is there. We have swamps, okay. Versus this other term, which is not even that super new, but it's newer, okay. When we think about apartheid, this is a system of institutional racial segregation and discrimination. And these areas are actually food apartheids because they too are created by racially discriminatory processes and policies and practices and systems and laws and all the things. Using the term apartheid focuses our examination on the intersection of root causes that created this low income, that created these low food access areas, and importantly points us toward working for structural change to address these root causes instead of blaming the people. Like they chose these places to come in and to leave. Because then we have this article, why supermarkets have abandoned some of America's poorest neighborhoods. This is from Ashley D. Stevens, and this is from 2024 as well. 2024 was popping on the grocery stores, for real, though. And so in there, she talks about the fact that since 2011, the number of dollar stores has climbed from 20,000 to 30,000, and there's now more of them, at least at this point in 2024, than Walmart and McDonald's combined. I thought there was hella Walmarts. I thought there was hella McDonald's. But she said there's more dollar stores. And also Tufts University School of Medicine, as well as the Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy, have deemed these, the dollar stores, to be the fastest growing food retailers in the U.S. This is largely because supermarkets have been abandoning inner cities for suburban and ex-urban. And I was like, ooh, ex-urban. Come on, somebody. Okay, because gentrification, that's what that means. Ex-urban gentrification, locations for decades. Like literally, there's a 2005 study from, I hope I don't mess this up, but Kameshwari Patukashi. I'm gonna put it on the screen. But this amazing person did a 2005 study, and it went back through the 20th century to document the correlation between white flight, okay, and these supermarkets leaving. So when white folks left the area, when the big businesses left, slash the factories left, and the jobs therefore left, the white folks left. And when they left, the supermarkets left with them. A 2020 CNN article also backs this up with there's this woman Heather Gartledge, who was a spokesperson for a trade group for the food retail industry. Okay, and she said market, economic, and demographic factors influence a company's decision to establish a store. Grocery stores require an adequate customer base and economic support to remain viable. Real estate costs and availability are significant factors to determine where and how a store is built. Now, we could do a deeper dive into redlining, okay? But redlining literally cuts along lines of race and socioeconomic status. So if you're saying that we need the economic and demographic factors to be on one accord in a white direction, because that's what you're really saying, then it's no wonder that supermarkets have left with white flight, and it's no wonder that they're not investing back into these communities. Now, this is where we get to a full circle moment, because instead of just talking about redlining as far as neighborhoods and cities go, this is actually a term that's popped up amongst the sociologists called supermarket redlining. All right, and there's an article here. Check it out. There we go. There's an article here from the National Library of Medicine, which is a official website of the United States government. I had to add that in there at the top so you can see that it's official. Okay. And so they're talking about special supermarket redlining and neighborhood vulnerability within Hartford, Connecticut. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the Hartford, Connecticut example. I have other examples at my disposal, but you can read about these here. Now, come back into this article because I already introduced this article. This is, again, I'm going back to the Stevens article right now. So they had some examples in there. So one of them was an example from the former Philadelphia mayor, Michael Nutter, who talks about trying to convince several national grocery chains to open a location in a predominantly Black area of the city, offering them tax incentives, only to receive very little interest. They was not interested. Tax incentives wasn't enough. We went to this is Nutter speaking to CNN. We went to virtually every national grocery retailer in our region. White people don't think Black people spend money. Target, hello. Target, hello. What happened to your sales, Target? What happened to your sales? Okay. But again, this is back before that, so I'm gonna give a little grace. White people don't think Black people spend money, and they weren't willing to invest in predominantly Black neighborhoods. Woo, former Mayor Nutter. And again, now we know the Black dollar matters. You can ask Target if you didn't know. But again, this is a mayor pleading with national grocery retailers to come, and they refused. With tax incentives, and they refused. And then for some other examples, they also gave an example of Chicago, and they said in 2016, Whole Foods opened its doors in the first and only location in Inglewood. And this is one of Chicago's poorest neighborhoods. It's a Black neighborhood in Chicago. So, they have to always put us right there. They say poorest, they usually mean Black. It's kind of like coded words, but nevertheless, that's my little critique for this author. The decision was reportedly, honey, I yapped so hard, the camera turned off. I yapped so hard. I'm just talking. Okay, but I'm back. Hello, I'm back. I don't even know where I left off, so I'm gonna have to kind of backtrack a little bit and see if we can catch up to one another. But I had just gone over these attempts from the former Philadelphia mayor, Michael Nutter, to convince these retailers to come to a predominantly Black area, predominantly Black neighborhood in Philadelphia. They wasn't buying it. Okay. And I was moving on to this example with Inglewood, where Whole Foods opened its doors for the first and only location there in 2016. And the author said one of Chicago's poorest neighborhoods. I was like, okay, just say Black. I don't urban Black, predominantly Black. I just let's say it plainly. But a Black neighborhood in Chicago. The decision was reportedly regarded by the company's co-CEO, this is Walter Robb, as one of the most meaningful things we've done as a company. While the city's mayor at the time, this was Emmanuel, said the opening of the store would result in opening doors to a new future for the Inglewood community. It generated a lot of buzz. 72% of the households were at risk of food insecurity, according to data from the University of Chicago at the time. But 5 years later, it closed. So again, they opened in 2016. Okay, it closed in 2021. 72% at the time it was opening, 72% of households were at risk of food insecurity. And they closed right before the pandemic. Oh no, right after the pandemic. My goodness. Which also, like, can we talk? It's another topic for another day. But right after people don't have that stimmy check. Not that stimmy check was not cutting it. Like people were literally dying. Like it COVID, come on, like let's. But anyway, they closed 2021. This decision received as much attention as the opening, pretty much, and so then former Mayor Lightfoot said the move was a great disappointment. It was a gut blow to the community, and some of the neighborhood leaders questioned whether the location, which received 13.5 million in federal tax credits, my God, my God, my God. They said that this Whole Foods received 13.5 million with an M, because let's keep it plain, $13.5 million in federal tax credits. And folks wonder, should it have ever opened in the first place? I think not, because they knew that y'all could have put a more sensible store there. Whole Foods. The only time it's really worth going to Whole Foods, my personal opinion, inserted here, is when you have that Amazon Prime membership and they got them sales. Okay? And you must stay on the outside of the store. So produce areas, things like that, nice sales. Inside with the, like, pantry products, expensive. Like, and you said 72% of the folks were already at risk of food insecurity. You said it's one of the poorest neighborhoods, and you spent all that money to put a Whole Foods there. Like, come, let's get so serious. Let's get so serious. Now, talking about Inglewood really makes me want to get into the environmental justice aspect, because there's also a major study for Inglewood from the University of Chicago that talks about just health disparities and stuff like that. I'm gonna save that for the next episode. I'm not gonna go there, but we will be circling back to this. So stay tuned, keep up with me, because that'll be in the very next episode. Now, another example we have is 2023 with Aldi closing a key location for Black and impoverished Minneapolis neighborhoods. We always tie together with poverty, when they shuttered a location on its north side. And this is a statement that they said: "We are sad, frustrated, and angry that Aldi, one of the three main sources of fresh produce and basic necessities at an accessible price point in North Minneapolis, suddenly announced its permanent closure this week." And that was from the food security nonprofit Appetite for Change. And they wrote that in a statement at the time. They also said that they were not surprised. So, again, true to this, sadly not new to this. They continued, so they said again, they're not surprised, and they continued in saying that the North Side has a history of businesses coming to the neighborhood and then abruptly exiting, leaving our community shaken by the instability. Abrupt closures seen all too often in our community cause gaps in essential goods, services that are not easily or swiftly replaced. Now, I don't want to leave you on a sour note. But that is why I do think that food apartheid it's more than reasonable. New term. It's more than reasonable. It's more than reasonable that we give up food desert and we say food apartheid, because this is intentional. These decisions don't, like, $13.5 million to put a Whole Foods there. My G, you could have put up like just a market, a no name brand market, give some farmers some money to bring in their produce, Black farmers at that, to bring in their produce and sell it at a reasonable rate. You could put that money back into the community for a community run and like rent owned grocery store, a Whole Foods, Amazon. But we're gonna end on a positive note. And I'm gonna get into that environmental justice in just a second. So, in the piece from Sevilla, so I'll put it back here. In this piece, she mentioned Karen Washington. We love her down. She also mentioned the the ways that we're trying to counter the systematic food insecurity, i.e., food apartheid. And the La Via Campesina started this food sovereignty movement which has expanded globally. It's touched urban farming from Baltimore to indigenous foodways. Okay. And so here I have their purpose. It is the Soul Fire Farm. It is an Afro Indigenous centered community farm and training center dedicated to uprooting racism and seeding sovereignty in the food system. With deep reverence for the earth and wisdom of our ancestors, we practice regenerative ag- agro- agroecology, agro- agroecology, raise and distribute life-giving food, equip the rising generation of BIPOC farmers, and mobilize communities to work toward food and land sovereignty. So they are a 501c3 nonprofit educational organization. You can learn more about them, find out ways to support them, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And that's all for this episode. You're going to catch me on the next one talking about environmental injustice. Please and thank you. See you there. Bye. This was a short one.